Welcome to a deep dive into the life of Sambhaji Maharaj. We're going to be taking a look at excerpts from his Wikipedia entry. This is no ordinary history lesson.
No, not at all.
Get ready for political dramas, daring escapes.
Military campaigns.
Oh, yeah.
That would rival any, historical fiction thriller.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sambhaji, the second Chhatrapati of the Maratha Empire, a figure who inspires both admiration and a lot of debate, to be honest.
Right.
His life was a whirlwind. I mean, you talk about political intrigue, military, really incredible military achievements, but also a lot of controversial decisions.
So we're talking about the eldest son of the legendary Shivaji, the founder of the Maratha Empire. I mean, talk about a legacy to try to live up to.
Huge shoes to fill. And his life, right from the beginning, is really interesting. Born in 1657 at the formidable Purandar Fort. He unfortunately lost his mother Saibai when he was only 2 years old. And interestingly, he was raised by his grandmother, Jijabai, a woman who had significant influence in Shivaji's own upbringing.
It seems like strong women shaping future leaders, but at 9 years old, he becomes a political hostage to the Mughals. I mean, can you imagine being thrust into that world at such a young age?
It's just a sign of the times they lived in, right? This was a common practice. He was sent to live with Raja Jai Singh of Amber as part of the treaty Shivaji had signed with the Mughals. He even rose to the rank of Mansabdar, which is a Mughal military officer. What impact must that have had at such a young age, right?
Living in the heart of the Mughal court.
Yeah.
Surrounded by, completely different culture than his own. And then he pulls off an escape from house arrest.
With Shivaji.
With Shivaji, right under Aurangzeb's nose. I mean, that's straight out of a Bollywood movie.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I mean, do we know, did they sneak out in disguise?
What happened?
Secret tunnel,
The exact details are a little bit shrouded in mystery, but it's pretty clear it would have taken immense planning, a lot of courage, and probably a little bit of luck as well. But, it speaks volumes, I think, about Sambhaji's character at that young age, resourceful, defiant, a bit of a risk taker, right? But we have to remember that relations between the Marathas and the Mughals weren't always hostile. There were times of cooperation, even alliances. In fact, after that escape, he's reinstated as a Mansabdar, and he actually fights alongside Mughal forces against Bijapur.
It sounds very complex with those alliances shifting, but then he ends up imprisoned. Not by the enemy, but by his own father, Shivaji. What happened there?
This is one of the most debated episodes of his early life. Some attribute it to him being, I guess how they phrase it, as indulging in, sensual pleasures.
Right.
Others say, no, it was a more serious transgression, maybe a challenge to his father's authority.
Wow.
So the exact reason is unclear, but it definitely suggests a strain in the relationship between the father and the son.
That's heavy. Imprisoned by your own father. And then to make it even more complex, he defects to the Mughals, joining forces with Diler Khan, a prominent Mughal general. I mean, some historians see this as rebellion, others a calculated move for power. What do you think?
Yeah, it continues to fascinate historians today, right?
Right.
What was going on? Was this a young man lashing out? Or was it actually a very, very shrewd maneuver to gain leverage? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
He did spend his formative years in the Mughal court, so maybe he was seeing opportunities that other people weren't seeing. Or maybe he was just, completely disillusioned and wanted to carve out his own path. Who knows? But this defection, this is just setting the stage for much more drama to come.
And then Shivaji dies in 1680, leaving the Maratha throne vacant.
Huge.
What happens next?
Well, his death throws the Maratha Empire into complete turmoil. It creates this power vacuum, and everyone's trying to fill it. And Sambhaji at this point is still technically a defector.
Oh, wow.
Talk about bad timing.
Yeah. So who steps into this power vacuum?
Well, Sambhaji's stepmother, Soyarabai,
Okay.
seizes the opportunity and crowns her own son, Rajaram, as the Chhatrapati, and whether that was legitimate or just a blatant power grab, it's still debated today.
Wow. That's
hard to say.
So a classic power struggle, but somebody's not going to just sit back and watch, is he?
Absolutely not. In a really dramatic turn of events, he escapes from Mughal custody and races against time to kind of make sure that he gets his claim to the throne. He secures key forts. He has this web of alliances, and ultimately he claims his rightful place as Chhatrapati in 1680.
It sounds like he kind of inherited his father's cunning and determination. But this victory didn't come without a price, did it?
No. To solidify his position, he had to deal with, he had conspiracies. He actually ends up executing Soyarabai and others accused of treason. So this was a very decisive and potentially ruthless act.
Right.
That had huge repercussions.
So he ascends to the throne, but he's inherited a kingdom riddled with internal strife. Facing all these external enemies, it sounds like his reign is not going to be peaceful at all.
It is a pressure cooker
Yeah.
of political and military challenges. This is where things get really interesting. His reign is defined by almost constant conflict, not just the Mughals under Aurangzeb, but the cities of Janjira, the Portuguese, even Mysore. It's multi-front, it's demanding strategic brilliance.
Right, a real trial by fire. And from what I understand, he was a pretty capable military leader. In fact, one of his first acts as Chhatrapati is a pretty bold move, the sack of Burhanpur in 1680. And this wasn't just a raid. This was like a devastating blow that kind of sent shockwaves through the Mughal Empire.
A Maratha army sweeping into this wealthy Mughal city, disrupting trade, seizing riches, leaving a trail of destruction. I mean, what a statement. It's like he was saying, I am not afraid to strike deep into enemy territory, and I am a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, sounds like he learned from his father. But then he does something that almost seems like a risky gamble. He offers refuge to a Mughal prince, Akbar, who had rebelled against his own father, Aurangzeb. What was he thinking? Was he trying to kind of exploit the divisions within the Mughal Empire?
It was a high-stakes gamble, no doubt. I mean, he's essentially poking the bear,
Right,
hoping to use that internal conflict
right,
in his advantage. Did he believe that Akbar could really overthrow Aurangzeb
right.
and become a puppet ruler, or was this just a distraction? Who knows? The sources don't really say exactly what was going on in his head.
Right, it's like a high-stakes game of chess,
Totally.
constantly adapting to the changing political landscape. Even with these setbacks, he holds his own. How would you describe his military strategies?
He understood that he couldn't match the Mughals in terms of pure numbers.
Right,
He had to be much more fluid, so he embraced this blend of, guerrilla warfare, strategic retreats, but then swift, decisive strikes when the opportunity arose.
and that proved to be pretty effective, especially in the challenging terrain of the Deccan. I mean, like the Siege of Ramsay in 1682, it's a great example. The Mughals threw everything they had at that fort, but the Maratha defenders held firm.
Imagine that. Massive Mughal army
Yeah.
just encircling this fort. Relentless attacks. They used everything, mines, siege towers. And the Marathas, under Sambhaji, met them with this unwavering courage. For 5 months, they repelled the Mughal onslaught.
5 months.
5 months.
It's incredible.
I think it's a real testament to the resilience
Right.
and the military skill of the Marathas and Sambhaji's ability to inspire his troops.
Sounds like he was really good at defensive warfare.
Yeah,
But he also launched campaigns of his own,
he did.
some of which had a much darker side.
Right.
I'm thinking specifically of the Goa campaign of 1683.
Yeah.
What was the objective?
Well, he wanted to disrupt the Portuguese support for the Mughals. He saw the Portuguese as a threat. He does succeed in disrupting their operations. But the campaign was marred by, there were acts of brutality against civilians, widespread looting, destruction of churches.
Oh, wow.
And even, people being enslaved, men and women.
Right.
It's a difficult chapter. Casts a real shadow, I think.
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white. Even the leaders that we might admire make terrible choices.
Yes.
But he also showed that he was pragmatic. He understood the importance of alliances, and he was willing to negotiate, like the treaty he signed with the English in Bombay. That was a good example of that, right?
A shrewd move. Recognizing he needed English weapons, gunpowder, especially because the Marathas lacked the heavy artillery required for sieges.
Right,
This treaty gave him access to that,
right.
really important resources, and then he could focus on solidifying his power along the Western Ghats.
Forging alliances, securing resources, holding his own against multiple enemies. What about his attempts to expand the Maratha Empire south into Mysore? I understand that wasn't as successful. What kind of challenges did he face?
Yeah, the southern front was a problem for the Marathas in general. For Shivaji as well, he encountered fierce resistance
Okay,
from Chhatrapati Wadyar, the ruler of Mysore.
okay.
Unfamiliar terrain,
Right,
logistical challenges.
right.
He was forced to withdraw.
Wow. So even the most brilliant leaders have limitations, huh? But with all these wars and campaigns, what was happening inside the Maratha Empire itself? Was everyone united behind him? Or were there still those internal divisions bubbling under the surface?
Yeah, unfortunately, those divisions, they didn't just magically disappear.
Right.
While he had his supporters, skilled commanders, he always faced challenges from within, the Maratha nobility.
Right.
Some of them never really truly accepted him.
Right.
You have to remember, he came to power with that cloud, right? Having been a defector to the Mughals.
So even while he's fighting these external enemies, he's constantly having to watch his back at home.
It must have been exhausting, right? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah.
And to make it worse, some of his own actions alienated people even further. His decision to burn villages, while, strategically it made sense,
Well.
Denying resources to the enemy, it created resentment among the people he was supposed to be protecting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Burning villages is pretty drastic,
Yeah,
bound to have consequences.
yeah.
And then in 1683, he executes 24 people for conspiracy. Was he just being paranoid? Or was this a legitimate act of justice?
It's hard to say for sure, right? I mean, some accounts paint him as, he was a decisive ruler rooting out treason,
Right.
but others suggest that he was just increasingly fearful of betrayal, maybe because of that earlier plot against him when
Right.
he was, trying to take the throne.
Right.
It's that age-old thing, right? Power, it can be intoxicating.
Yeah.
That line between being decisive and being a tyrant can be very thin.
It sounds like this vicious cycle. The more enemies he makes, the more he feels like he has to consolidate his power, which in turn creates more enemies.
Right.
And all this while, you've got Aurangzeb and the Mughal army just looming
Yeah, like a predator.
like a predator, just waiting.
Waiting to strike.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like a Greek tragedy in the making.
Yeah, I mean, there are those parallels there, right?
Yeah.
The hero facing these impossible odds. But his own actions are contributing to his downfall. The last few years of his reign, a lot of setbacks, betrayals, the death of Hembro Mohite, a key Maratha commander. That was a major blow
Okay.
in 1687 at the Battle of Way. And as the mobile pressure intensified, you start to see more and more desertions.
So the tides are turning. It seems like those internal divisions, and then, of course, you have this relentless mobile advance.
Yeah.
Just chipping away at his power. How does this all lead to his capture?
It's unclear the details. We know that in 1689, he was traveling with a small group of advisors. He's apprehended by mobile forces at Sangameshwar. Some say he was betrayed
Wow.
by his own people.
Betrayed by his own people?
Yeah, who maybe had just grown tired of his rule.
Right.
Or they saw an opportunity to get on the good side of the Mughals.
What a heartbreaking end to a ruler who had fought so fiercely for his kingdom.
Yeah.
What happens to him after he's captured?
He's taken to Aurangzeb's court, and the mobile accounts say that he was given a chance to surrender,
Right.
his forts and his treasure in exchange for his life.
Okay.
But they say that Sambhaji was defiant
Wow.
to the very end, refused, and they even say that he went so far as to insult the emperor and the prophet Muhammad.
So he chooses defiance over surrender,
It seems so.
even knowing that that means certain death.
Yeah. Of course, we have to consider, maybe this is just how the Mughals wanted to portray it,
Right.
to make him look worse,
Right.
to kind of justify their actions. But it does seem to fit with what we know of him.
Yeah.
This proud, unyielding, willing to fight for what he believed in,
Yeah.
even when the odds were completely stacked against him.
And ultimately, this defiance leads to his execution.
Yes. According to the mobile sources, he's subjected to weeks of torture before he's publicly executed.
Wow.
At Tulipur
Okay.
in March of 1689.
Oh,
And even the details of the execution, they vary.
okay.
Some stories say that his body was thrown into a river. Others say that it was cut into pieces and
Yeah.
displayed as a warning to anyone else who might repel.
What a brutal end to a life, filled with all this drama and conflict.
Yeah.
Moments of brilliance, moments of, some real cruelty.
Yeah.
But even in death, his story continues. His son, Shahu,
Right.
captured alongside him, spends 18 years as a mobile prisoner
Wow.
before he's eventually released and becomes Chhatrapati himself.
Yeah.
And Sambhaji's wife, Yesubai, she was also held captive.
Right.
Didn't gain her freedom until 1719.
When the Marathas had really gained their strength back.
It's incredible. It's like his legacy just lived on.
It did. His death, it couldn't extinguish that flame, of resistance.
Right.
His son, his wife, they carried on the fight. His name became this rallying cry.
Right.
For anyone who opposed the Mughals,
Yeah.
you could argue his martyrdom strengthened their cause.
Yeah. It's like, even in defeat, there's this element of victory.
There is.
His life was cut short.
Yeah.
But his impact, undeniable. He showed that the Marathas, they were not to be messed with.
Right.
That they could challenge the Mughals.
Yeah.
But as we've been talking about, his legacy is complicated.
It is.
He was brilliant militarily, but also capable of some pretty great cruelty.
Right.
Symbol of Maratha resistance.
Yeah.
But also someone who caused divisions
Yeah.
within his own people.
It's hard to really put him in a box.
Yeah.
Right. He was very much a product of his time.
Right.
That constant conflict.
Right, yeah.
All that political maneuvering in the Deccan in the 17th century. It was just a different world.
So how do we reconcile these two sides of him? How should we remember him? As a hero, a villain, or is it somewhere in between?
It's a question that people are still asking today, right?
Yeah.
How do you sum up someone like Sambhaji? He inspired such loyalty, but also,
Yeah.
such opposition.
Yeah, so what's his legacy?
I mean, I think he's revered by a lot of people
Yeah,
as this valiant military leader.
right,
Someone who really stood up to the Mughals.
right.
The way he defended his kingdom,
Yeah,
his strategic brilliance. I mean, when you think about the odds he was up against,
yeah.
it's pretty incredible.
And then the way he died, too.
All right. I mean, you can't.
It just solidified his image as a martyr.
It did.
He was resisting tyranny.
Yeah, and his death, I mean, it really became this rallying cry
Right.
for the Marathas. I mean, for generations. But like we've been talking about, there's the other side.
There's that darker side.
Right,
Yeah.
the executions, the conflicts within his own ranks. It's a more complicated picture.
So, I mean, is he a flawed hero? Is that what it is? He had this brilliant mind,
Yeah.
but maybe wasn't always the wisest or the most compassionate.
I think I don't know if we can, put people in boxes like that, right?
Right.
Hero, villain. He was a product of his time.
Yeah.
I mean, the Deccan in the late 17th century,
Yeah.
it was just brutal. Power was always shifting, and survival meant making some really tough choices.
Yeah.
Sometimes choices that we would look at today and say, wow, that was really harsh.
Right. It is a reminder that history is so much more
It is.
than just battles and dates and names.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding people
Yeah.
and what makes them tick.
What were their motivations? What pressures were they under? I mean, that's what makes it so interesting to me, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating to think about, his writings, his poetry.
Yeah.
He wrote about statecraft. I mean, what was he thinking?
Yeah, it's like, you're getting this window into his mind, right?
Yeah.
His understanding of leadership, what he wanted for the Maratha Empire. I mean, this was a man dealing with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
A lot of challenges. Always that threat of betrayal.
Yeah.
I wonder what he would think,
Yeah.
looking back on it all,
Yeah, what would he think of how we view him today?
Yeah, what would he think of his successes and failures?
It's a question we can't answer, but it really makes you think.
It does.
It makes you think about the person behind the historical figure.
And I think that's the main takeaway
Yeah.
from our deep dive into Sambhaji Maharaj. This guy, so many contradictions,
Right.
capable of incredible things, but also capable of some really, terrible things. And his legacy is still debated.
Right.
It's a reminder that history is never simple.
It's never black and white.
It's a tapestry, it's woven with all these threads: ambition, betrayal, courage, and ultimately,
Yeah.
I think, just that human desire for power, for legacy, for something that will outlast us.
I mean, you've given me so much to think about.
Yeah.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
That's the thing about history, right? There's always more to discover.
Yeah.
More layers to peel back,
Yeah.
new perspectives to consider.
So to our listener, what other figures from this era, the Marathas, the Mughals, I mean, who are you curious about? Whose stories are waiting to be told?
Keep seeking knowledge.
Yeah.
Keep questioning.
Yeah.
Keep exploring. And until next time.
Yeah, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the life of Sambhaji Maharaj.